good morning. Welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the program. We hope all is well with you, and we hope that you're keeping well. To start off this morning's edition of the program, we have a couple of dates to share with you. Sorry, updates, if what slipped me there for a moment. This, of course, following quite a number of news stories within the last week that impacts, of course, the Caribbean, but the whole world. The first of which was the second ever CARICOM India Summit, which took place in Ghana last week. And now there was news coming out in respect to CARICOM agreements, which we can get into a bit later on. But the world was focused on the fact that India, or in this specific case, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, was only the second sitting leader of India to visit Ghana in 56 years. And there were questions as to exactly why or how was this taking place. Now, journalists around the world were reporting in as per the meetings and as per the conversations. And of course, there was a lot of diplomatic exchanges as well. To a certain extent, India pitched itself to Ghana. Well, the argument suggests that it surrounds India in its stage or need for more oil and natural gas supplies and sources, is now extending its arms to its Caribbean partners. So let's start off this morning's AM Prime edition with this update, courtesy of Ghana Newsroom, in respect to the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Ghana last week.
The Caribbean Community, or CARICOM for short, is a regional bloc of 15 Caribbean countries. And leaders from those countries came to Georgetown, Guyana on Wednesday for the second ever CARICOM India Summit. Now, this summit was organized as the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, was in Guyana, or is in Guyana, for a 3-day state visit. And as he addressed the opening ceremony of that summit, Prime Minister Modi made it clear that he wants India to be a key partner for CARICOM. The Prime Minister, in his address to the regional leaders and other officials, spoke of the very many ways India can partner with Caribbean countries to help them meet their needs and satisfy their wants. Now, he extended several offers to those Caribbean leaders, ranging from the supply of cargo and passenger vessels to sharing agriculture technologies that would help expand food production in this region. The Prime Minister also spoke about India's long-standing support for training and in healthcare, and he said the country stands willing to expand that partnership with countries in the region.
Excellencies, in all of these pillars of CARICOM, there is one thing that is common, and that is that all of these are based on your priorities and your needs. This is the core principle of our cooperation. I am keen to hear your views on all of these matters.
Of particular note was that the Prime Minister wanted to also support the region's sport and culture development. He believes that sport and culture are two areas which the Caribbean region share a strong tie and have a strong connection with India. The Prime Minister said India wants to support the development of women's cricket here in the Caribbean.
And I'm not saying this just because India won the World Cup here. My proposal is that in order to further promote not only cricket relations, but also women empowerment, we can provide training to 11 young women cricketers from each CARICOM nation.
Now, India is the world's fastest growing major economy. But for Caribbean leaders, India stands as a beacon that represents the cause of other developing nations. This was made clear by both the Guyanese President, Dr. Irfan Ali, and the Grenadian Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell, who's also serving as the current chairman of CARICOM.
India's pivotal role in BRICS and your steadfast advocacy for the developing world underscores your commitment to advancing the aspirations of the Global South. These initiatives have elevated India's stature and placed the concerns of developing nations, including the small island developing and low-lying coastal states of the Caribbean, firmly on the global agenda.
We envision a future where CARICOM-India relations continue to flourish and expand. Closer cooperation and collaboration amongst the leaders of CARICOM member states and India would serve to further enhance the partnerships and contribute to successfully strengthening our existing economic, commercial, and people-to-people relations.
Wednesday's summit was just a part of Prime Minister Modi's 3-day state visit to Guyana, but it was quite significant. For one, the summit comes as India is trying to deepen its relationship with CARICOM. For context, CARICOM and India started to formalize their bilateral ties since 1985. In the years after that, but particularly in the early 2000s, there was great movement in deepening the ties between India and CARICOM. In 2019, at the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, the first ever CARICOM-India summit was held. And now this is the second time that summit is being held. But notably, it is the first time the summit is happening in a CARICOM member state. And it is significant that this summit is happening here in Guyana. Of course, Guyana is one of the founding members of CARICOM, and Guyana is also where the headquarters of CARICOM, its secretariat, is housed. Prime Minister Modi will conclude his 3-day visit to Guyana on Thursday with several other engagements. Reporting for the news.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So, of course, that update from last week's visit by the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, to Ghana for the second ever CARICOM India Summit. So, of course, as I mentioned, quite a number of stories coming out from that summit, in particular in respect to decisions made by the leaders of CARICOM. But all eyes, all focus, of course, was on the arrival of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Ghana for that particular summit, and the extensions on the part of India in respect to diplomacy. Of course, we will continue to share such updates with you on EM Prime as they come in. Now, moving forward to another news story, of course, and this one had most people's eyes glued to the television over the course of the weekend. And that is COP29 and the conversations that took place in Azerbaijan. On Saturday, breaking news across all channels stating that the talks were on the verge of collapse following the exit from negotiation tables of most, if not all, of what is considered developing states globally. They left the chair with a sense of dissatisfaction. Eventually, an agreement was reached, and though that be the case, it still seems unsatisfactory in respect to pledging support for those most affected by climate change. Of course, the global north and the global south. Let's take a look at this report, courtesy of BBC.
World leaders have agreed an 11th-hour deal on climate finance at the COP29 summit in Azerbaijan. Wealthier countries have pledged $300 billion a year by 2035 to help poorer nations tackle climate change. But there wasn't universal support for the deal, with the Indian delegation calling the figure a paltry sum. Just hours before, it looked like the talks were on the verge of collapse after a group representing underdeveloped and lower-lying nations walked out of the conference room. They eventually came back to the negotiating table, but were angered by the offer from wealthier nations, which was far short of the $500 billion they wanted. From Baku, here's our climate editor, Justin Rolat.
It was in the early hours of this morning when the key text was agreed. To huge applause from the room. This deal was hard fought. At one stage, the talks looked set to collapse. Representatives of dozens of the world's least developed countries stormed out of a key meeting.
we've just walked out. We came here to this COP for a fair deal. We feel that we haven't been heard, and there's a deal to be made, and we have not been consulted.
At the same time, there was an effort by a group of fossil fuel-rich countries, led by Saudi Arabia, to water down a promise made at last year's COP conference to transition away from fossil fuels. The final deal here includes both a $300 billion a year commitment to helping developing countries tackle climate change and that strong language on cutting emissions.
I'm very pleased that we've got this deal through. It's the right thing for Britain. It's the right thing for speeding up the clean energy transition, which is good for Britain and it will help protect us against climate change, and that's the right thing to do. And it will also help generate jobs and growth for people in Britain. It's an 11th hour deal at the 11th hour for climate and for keeping 1.5 degrees alive. It's the right thing to do for Britain and the right thing for the world.
Some people are saying this deal isn't generous enough, that developed nations are dodging the debt they owe the developing world. Others are saying it shows that despite the divisions, despite Donald Trump threatening to pull America out of the process, the world can come together in this cooperative UN effort to tackle the existential threat of climate change. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News, Baku.
Well, as we've heard, there's been a mixed reaction to the deal. The Indian representative at COP29 said they had strong reservations to the agreement and accused developed countries of being unwilling to fulfil their financial obligations to the rest of the world. Here's their delegate, Chandni Raina.
This document is nothing more than an optical illusion. This, in our opinion, will not address the enormity of the challenge we all face. Therefore, we oppose the adoption of this document. We oppose the adoption of this document. India opposes the adoption of this document, and please take note and regard of what we have just said from the floor of this room.
Henna Hundal, National Coordinator of Climate Live USA and COP29 delegate who's just returned from Baku, shared her thoughts on the deal.
You know, I think it's a complex situation. On the one hand, you have about 198 parties having to come together, have 2 weeks to reach a consensus. This includes parties whose economies are driven primarily by fossil fuels, and others whose economies are being destroyed by fossil fuels. So the fact that you can even get an agreement out of that type of a heterogeneous group is actually quite extraordinary and something to celebrate. At the same time, we know that this agreement has fallen quite short of what we know was actually needed. Economists had estimated that we actually need $1 trillion of climate finance by 2030, $1.3 trillion by 2035, about half coming from the public sector, half coming from the private sector, and this has fallen quite short of that. So I think there's room to celebrate, but also room to recognize that we have much more work to do.
The German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock described these talks as the last stand by the fossil fuel world. Do you think that that's a fair description?
You know, I think we've certainly have seen a lot of fossil fuel lobbyists who attend these conferences, and that's been a point of concern among many people. It's also a matter of these conferences structurally involve bringing multiple parties and people and those with different interests around the table. It's really a very wide net that you're casting, and so it can be quite challenging to reach an agreement when you have all these people coming with different ambitions, visions, agendas, and goals, and to finally reach something like even $300 billion of climate finance is something worth celebrating. But I think there's definitely room for improvement here, and certainly really taking a hard look at the role of the fossil fuel industry and potentially having a role at these talks is something that we need to do for sure.
How much was the absence of key leaders and countries represented here making? How much difference did that make to the mood and the momentum at the COP29?
Well, I think it's undeniable that President-elect Donald Trump is returned to office next year, casted a long shadow over the proceedings of the conference. I mean, I heard talk about that both overtly and tacitly. People sort of writing off the United States' participation for the next 4 years. It was kind of stunning to witness, given that I was there at COP26 in Scotland in 2021, when then President Biden's climate envoy, John Kerry, played a crucial role in negotiating the final deal that was reached in the 11th hour. So I think the United States' role is really coming into question. We also saw French President Macron, German Chancellor Scholz, the Japanese Prime Minister, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau also not make face. And I think that's important to think about, is there enough political will to actually execute on the pact that was reached? I think that remains an open question.
And much of the money that's supposed to be delivered here is actually going to come from the private sector, isn't it? How likely is it to actually materialise?
I think that's something we need to keep our eye on. I mean, it's certainly important. If we look at, for example, the Loss and Damage Fund, last year at COP28 in Dubai, millions of dollars were pledged by countries for that fund, which was designed to provide developing countries with money to specifically navigate the extreme weather disasters that they're facing that are causing so much destruction and devastation. And we've seen only a fraction of that money actually materialize. So I think that's probably one reason why the conference extended into overtime in the manner that it did and was particularly fraught, because not only do we need to reach the numbers, those climate finance numbers that the economists are telling us, but we have to make sure that these are not empty promises. And so I think there's certainly that sentiment felt among a lot of people, and increasingly so as we watch some of these promises not quite materialize over the years.
So, of course, that deal, as you can see from the report, falling short by an estimated $700 million to $1 trillion. Of course, a sense of dissatisfaction being expressed by small island developing states and underlying nations, of course. Well, we saw from India there for a second, one of the members of the BRICS group of nations, but climate advocates have expressed a sense of dissatisfaction, and though a deal has been reached, it is seems to be in favor of the more developed nations. That $300 billion, of course, being invested annually until 2030, 2035 for the energy transition. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got one more update to share with you, and it's a bit of an extended one. This comes from France 24. 1 year ago, they actually brought forward a report on the bird flu. Now, we are monitoring the situation globally in respect to bird flu cases. There have been outbreaks across the United States, across Canada, and as far as Australia. But 1 year ago, when cases started to appear in large clusters, of course, there were question marks surrounding whether or not this can be the next pandemic. Though those in authority, particularly from health organizations within various nations who have been impacted, are suggesting that there's no need to panic as yet. There was concern in particular, and there still is concern about the transmission of the avian virus from birds to cows. So that is something that has also been a focus. But let's take a look at this report. As I said, 1 year ago from France 24, exactly what were they seeing?
It has ravaged farms, decimated wild birds, and spilled onto mammals. Can the avian flu spark the next human pandemic? Scientists are taking no chances tracking the virus to predict where it could strike next.
Nous sommes dans une des zones où on produit beaucoup de canards. Nous sommes éleveurs, gaveurs et conserveurs de canards crans. Depuis quelques années, il y a une chose qui s'appelle la grippe aviaire qui sévit en France, mais pas seulement qu'en France, et qui entraîne une très forte mortalité de nos animaux quand on est touché. Les canards est une des espèces les plus sensibles à la grippe aviaire. En temps normal, les canards sont en extérieur, ils se promènent dans les champs, dans les prés, ce qui n'est pas le cas actuellement puisque c'est 100% de leur temps en confinement. C'est quelque chose de difficile à vivre pour eux et pour nous. Certains loups ne verront jamais le jour ni jamais le soleil. Les animaux confinés vont se développer moins vite, moins bien, donc il y aura une perte en production au final, c'est-à-dire moins de viande, moins de foie gras. Cette grippe aviaire, ça reste une menace pour nous, même si on n'y est pas confronté directement, parce qu'on n'est pas au risque que ça arrive, qu'on soit obligé d'abattre nos canards. Il y a une gestion des élevages contaminés qui me paraît excessive, c'est-à-dire un élevage dans lequel on va trouver des animaux contaminés. L'élevage va être systématiquement abattu et on va aussi faire des dépeuplements 3 km autour de l'élevage, c'est-à-dire qu'on tue des dizaines, des centaines, des milliers, des millions d'animaux qui sont sains. Moi, ça me paraît une aberration totale, ce type de gestion. Ça pose vraiment beaucoup de soucis pour l'avenir. Après, si la seule solution, c'est la vaccination, moi, je suis totalement pour. Je vaccine mes canards et ils passent leur vie en extérieur, dans les prés, et ils sont beaucoup plus heureux.
This highly infectious strain of bird flu has been ripping through farms for a number of years now. Influenza A, also known as H5N1, was first detected at a goose farm in China in 1996. It can spread through entire flocks of birds through the animals' droppings and saliva. It's the fourth wave of avian influenza to grip Europe since 2015 and its worst outbreak on record, with nearly 50 million poultry culled in 2022, 16 million in France alone, one of the countries hit hardest by the disease. The way the disease is expanding has also set off alarm bells. It usually flares up in autumn before fading away in spring and summer. This outbreak, though, has defied all seasons. But what really has scientists concerned is the flu's pandemic potential, as infections have been reported across a wide spectrum of birds and other species, including mammals. There's one question on everyone's mind: what about human transmission? So far, H5N1 is a low risk to humans, but authorities are on high alert. The more it continues to spread, the greater the chances it may evolve. Every mutation is now being watched closely to avoid this scenario.
On est dans le laboratoire national de référence pour l'influenza aviaire. Nous sommes là pour faire le diagnostic officiel et dire si oui ou non c'est bien de l'influenza aviaire et quel est le virus qui provoque cette infection chez l'oiseau. Donc depuis août 2022, on a recensé un peu plus de 300 foyers en élevage. C'est énorme parce que la saison n'est pas encore terminée. Il faut aller jusqu'au mois de juillet de 2023 pour savoir l'ensemble des foyers qu'on pourra avoir cette année. Si on se réfère à l'année précédente, où on a eu à peu près de 1400 foyers en élevage, et donc c'est sans précédent, c'est 3 fois plus que les épizooties précédentes. Dès qu'on suspecte de l'influenza aviaire dans un élevage ou chez des oiseaux sauvages, donc des prélèvements sont faits, ce sont des écouvillons, un peu comme ce qu'on peut voir pour le Covid. Et nous affinons pour savoir quel est le virus qui est présent. Donc actuellement, on recherche en premier lieu si c'est un H5N1 hautement pathogène et on prévient dans ce cas-là directement les autorités pour dire si c'est positif. Le virus qui circule actuellement, pour l'instant, c'est un virus qui est aviaire, mais on essaye de surveiller sa transmission chez d'autres espèces animales, chez des mammifères notamment. Dernièrement, en France, on a eu la détection d'un cas chez un chat domestique. Et ce qu'on a pu constater, par exemple, c'est que seulement une multiplication chez ce chat a permis d'avoir les mutations qui permettent de favoriser la transmission chez les mammifères. Par rapport à ce qu'on a pu voir avec le Covid-19, c'est un petit peu différent, c'est qu'on sait faire les vaccins contre l'influenza. La difficulté quand même avec ces virus-là, c'est qu'ils peuvent se transmettre très vite. On a potentiellement un virus qui n'a jamais été rencontré par l'homme et donc on aurait une épidémie sans précédent et auquel il faudrait faire face rapidement, même si on a la disponibilité de vaccins et de moyens thérapeutiques.
Scientists have been taken aback by the magnitude of this outbreak, mostly because wild birds have been hit hard. They're known to be the hosts and transmitters of the disease, but now they've also become the latest victims.
C'est pas nouveau que la faune sauvage soit concernée par la grippe aviaire. Ce qui est nouveau, c'est l'ampleur du phénomène. Le virus est de plus en plus fort. Avant, les oiseaux sauvages étaient touchés par le virus, mouraient avec une toute petite proportion. Et puis ensuite, il n'y avait pas de contamination. Ce qui est inquiétant aujourd'hui, c'est que le virus tue les oiseaux, mais surtout il résiste et se disperse. Ici en France, ce qu'on a constaté, c'est qu'il y avait deux grands groupes d'oiseaux qui ont été touchés. D'abord les rapaces, et en particulier les vautours. Ce qui est exceptionnel, il n'y avait jamais eu de vautours au niveau mondial qui étaient contaminés par la grippe aviaire. Il y a les oiseaux marins, c'est la première fois aussi que les oiseaux marins et notamment les fous de bassin sont touchés à ce point. On estime que 40% au moins des adultes sont morts et au moins 90% des poussins. Donc vous voyez, en une seule crise, on a perdu plusieurs milliers, dizaines de milliers d'oiseaux et on va avoir beaucoup de mal à ce que la population se relance.
Nous sommes sur la région parisienne, à 20 km de Paris, au sud. On arrive aujourd'hui à peu près à 1400 oiseaux morts, en 3 semaines à peu près, donc ce qui est quand même énorme. On est obligé de prendre notre bateau régulièrement, si vous voulez, à peu près tous les 2 jours, pour pouvoir constater le taux de mortalité sur les lacs. C'est une pandémie et on ne pensait pas qu'on allait arriver à ce taux-là. On est sur des mouettes rieuses essentiellement. On a eu des goélands, un canard, un cygne hier et également une poule d'eau. Une fois que les oiseaux sont ramassés la journée, on est obligé de les mettre dans un congélateur qui nous permet d'accueillir environ 270 mouettes rieuses. Mais aujourd'hui, si vous voulez, notre congélateur, avec un passage d'équarrissage une fois à la semaine, ne suffit plus. Aujourd'hui, pour moi, effectivement, c'est du jamais vu.
On se demande quelles vont être les espèces de la faune sauvage qui vont être les prochaines victimes. Et évidemment, on est très inquiet sur des espèces qui sont déjà en danger d'extinction et que la grippe aviaire se fixe sur ces espèces.
On est aujourd'hui dans une situation qui nous amène à faire le constat qu'on n'arrive pas à contrôler l'infection sans recours à la vaccination. Une de mes missions aujourd'hui, c'est de piloter les essais de vaccination qui permettront, on l'espère, la mise en œuvre de la vaccination dans ces élevages dans les prochains mois. L'objectif qui est fixé, c'est septembre 2023. Donc il y a des vraies exploitations qui sont partenaires et dans lesquelles on a testé les 2 solutions vaccinales. Ces animaux ont été suivis, ils ont été prélevés régulièrement par des écouvillons et des prises de sang tout le long de leur vie pour détecter les anticorps. Et on a en parallèle fait des tests moléculaires pour vérifier qu'il n'y avait pas de circulation de virus dans ces troupeaux vaccinés. On a des gens qui vont travailler en pathologie, c'est-à-dire qui vont étudier les lésions et la distribution du virus dans les organes des oiseaux qui sont infectés, pour, là encore, essayer de comprendre quelles sont les voies d'infection et de dissémination du virus. On sait en France que les palmipèdes, les canards, jouent un rôle prépondérant dans ce qu'on appelle la dynamique d'infection. Ce qui veut dire que si on arrive à contrôler l'infection chez le canard, on pense qu'on gagne une grande partie du contrôle de la maladie. Les collègues néerlandais ont mis un focus sur la poule, les collègues italiens sur la dinde. Et l'idée, c'est qu'on mette en commun les données et faire en sorte qu'à l'échelle européenne, on arrive à contrôler sur l'ensemble des volailles concernées l'infection via la vaccination. Un des enjeux essentiels dans la vaccination influenza, c'est d'être en mesure de certifier que les animaux qui sont vaccinés ne sont pas porteurs sains, on va dire, de virus à bas bruit. Il y a une certaine réticence et une certaine méfiance à l'échelle internationale. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, on dépasse cette discussion puisqu'on voit bien que la nature du risque a changé et que nous n'avons en fait pas trop le choix. Donc il n'y a pas une solution miracle et la vaccination ne sera pas la solution miracle, mais ça peut être un outil très important si on arrive à le combiner intelligemment aux autres outils, notamment l'hygiène et la surveillance.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
FanZone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Well, Keaton Shah, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the program. This morning, our first conversation focuses on the state of school infrastructure, a topic of which EM Prime has explored extensively since August, just before the new school term began. Even then, we were getting reports from Tutor as well as the NPTA, the National Parent Teachers Association, that there were issues with a number of schools and in a few instances, schools that were supposed to have a new compounds or new infrastructure, in other words, new school buildings, that had not happened just as yet. So there were always concerns regarding the safety of students when it came to some schools across Trinidad and Tobago due to their infrastructure. Now, the Minister of Education, speaking in the Senate on November 26, responded to a report that Tutor claims it has, alleging that 20 schools currently operating are unsafe and unsuitable for students and teachers. The Minister of Education denied this, stating that the ministry is not in possession of such reports and cannot confirm its accuracy, but also noted that the ministry does not operate any schools that have been deemed unfit or unsuitable for operations. So let's get into this morning as we are joined by the Vice President of Tutor, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Mr. Adesh Dwarka. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
A pleasant good morning to Mr. Shah. Pleasant good morning to your visitors, to your viewers, sorry.
Well, Mr. Dwarka, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Let's start with that report. According to the minister, which she says Tutor has, alleging that there are approximately 20 schools that are currently operating that are deemed unsafe or unsuitable for teachers and students. This report, which I do not have a copy of or I have not heard of, could you please expand a bit more as per the details of this report and exactly who collated this report?
So what is happening is that I'm not too sure the report that the minister would have referenced. However, usually at the start of every school term, and especially at the start of the academic year, what the association would do is that we would get in contact with the district field officers of the association, so that's DFOs, as well as the staff representatives of each school that we have to find out what is the readiness of the schools for occupation for a new school term. Right? Usually when we have meetings with the Ministry of Education as well, that is during the June, July period, we would ask about the school repair program for the preceding vacation and whatnot, so that we will have an idea of what is happening. Right? So any report that the association would have would be as a result of that particular kind of investigation. So we rely on our DFOs, our district field officers, we rely on our staff representatives who are at the schools, and based on those, national officers would visit the schools to see firsthand what are some of the issues that the various schools are experiencing. Based on that, we would compile reports, we would compile information to advocate for the relevant repairs in various schools.
At this point of time, though, from Tutor's position, from Tutor's knowledge, are there schools operating in Trinidad and Tobago which are deemed unsafe or unsuitable for occupation?
Right. So when we get reports from our schools, our district field officers, our staff representatives, we would visit, and then of course, based on that, we would invite OSH to come and have a look. So we just don't say, okay, the schools are unsafe, they are unsafe for occupation and whatnot. What we do is that we ensure that we have the correct perspective from the professionals who are deemed to do so. For example, recently there was a rat infestation at Presal Secondary School. So there were complaints about the cleanliness, there were complaints about the situation there. And of course, OSH would have gone in, they would have done their investigation, and they would have agreed that the school is unsanitary, the school is unhealthy, and they would have upheld the refusal of work of the teachers, right? So that is the basis on which we make our pronouncements. So only when OSH would have indicated, listen, we agree that the school is unsafe because of X, Y, and Z, then we say this is what is happening. A similar occurrence was in Aranguez recently, and Aranguez only came out this week, right? Because there were some infrastructural works that were ongoing that are continuing at the Aranguez North Secondary School, and 2 blocks were deemed fit by WASH. So what is happening there now is that the Form 4 and Form 5s are invited to return to school. So that is the basis on which the association would make their various positions and pronouncements regarding schools unfit for schools, for occupation.
How many schools have OSH for this academic year thus far? We were only in the first 2 and first academic term. But how many schools have OSH deemed unsafe or unsuitable?
Right. So we actually for the entire term we would have compiled a list of around 43 schools that OSH would have visited and would have had various situations with some of the things. Of course, not all of those schools were closed off. Not all of those schools had a refusal to work. There were various aspects of it that has to be dealt with, and the school continues based on that. There are a few schools who had a rotation system and whatnot. So yes, we have a number of schools that are ongoing. So what happens is that based on the reports to us, we would advocate. And then, of course, there would be some remedial program, and schools would be back out as with 2 or 3 days and whatnot. So that's the reality of it, right? So when it is raised at the Ministry of Education, they would come in, they would do some remedial works, and then, of course, school would begin.
Tell me about the procedure in respect to when OSH actually states that the school should not be operating, for whatever the reason may be. What is the procedure then on the part of OSH and tutor in getting this information to the Minister of Education and then liaising with the authorities to try and ensure that the school is up to par?
Right. So whenever there's an issue with a school, right, usually the first line is the principal. So the principal, via the SIMS system that the Ministry of Education has in place, that is the School Infrastructure Management System. It's an online system that principals can go and register the issues that they are having, infrastructural issues that they are having with the school. Based on that, the Ministry of Education more than likely will put that on a priority listing for work to begin. So that is the actual start of the process. So usually, principals have complained over the years that the issues on SIM has gone unattended for years, so that they would have placed complaints in this particular system, and they have not gotten the relevant work done in the school. As a result of that, there is deterioration, and when there is deterioration, and of course health and safety becomes an issue, only then OSH is invited. And when OSH is invited, they come and they do their independent investigation. Based on their investigation, they would advise the Ministry of Education as to what is the next course of action. So usually they would either write to the permanent secretary. If it is very severe, they would write to the permanent secretary and inform the permanent secretary that these are the findings of the OSH committee and the suggestions in terms of how it should be addressed and things like that.
So currently, with what has been put forward from the Minister of Education in the Senate last week, and from what you have stated this morning, from all positions, could you tell us if there are any schools that are not fully functional at this point in time, where they're having limited classes, or if there's any schools that are closed at this point in time due to these issues or concerns that you have actually pointed out this morning?
Right. So what is happening is that the one for certainty is that we have the Malik Secondary School that had a fire recently, as recent as last week, where 6 classrooms were destroyed. So currently, information reaching the association is that particular school is closed based on the fire services report and whatnot. Right. We have a number of other schools that have been decanted. It means that therefore they are not functioning from where they are supposed to. Right, so like for example, Presal Government Secondary, Palmas Government Secondary, Carpichaima Anglican Primary, Granville RC, right? We have Rosila Kindu, St. Dominic's RC, St. Rose's RC, St. Philip's Government Primary, Gaines Normal Primary, Sangre Chiquito Presbyterian, Claxtonville Junior Anglican, Monde Nuevo, RC, Talpara, RC. These schools have been decanting from where they are supposed to be and operating in community centers and whatnot, right? So that's the information that we have. But one of the things that we really want to highlight is the Lafayette RC School that has been operating since 2016 out of the Blanchishere Secondary School auditorium. So they have been since 2016. That school has been operating out of the hall area of the Blanchishere Secondary School, right? Tutor would have visited that particular school earlier to see exactly how that is operating. And of course, those are some of the concerns that the association have, because we have primary schools children, right, in a secondary school environment. And of course, safety is an issue. So it means that supervision, right, has to be at its utmost in situations like that, because of the possible interaction, right? So those are the kinds of situations that we have currently happening in our school system. Peter, what we have to understand is that we have 481 primary schools in Trinidad and Tobago, public primary schools. We have 64 private secondary schools. We have 133 public secondary schools and 63 private secondary schools. And those schools are 50 plus years old, right? Many of those schools, the majority of the schools, they are 50 plus years old. We have a couple new ones that were commissioned in 2000 plus, right? So and those schools are also having numerous problems. Schools like Arangwes North Secondary School that was commissioned in 2012, right? We have the Marabella South Secondary School. We have Barataria that has not been commissioned. We have Mount Hope that has not been commissioned. We have St. Joseph Secondary that has not been commissioned. And these schools has been operating with very poor infrastructure for a number of years, right? And that's part of the major issue that we are having, because our schools are very old. The maintenance plan that the Ministry of Education has, that is what we need to really focus on now, to ensure that the proper assessments are being done in the schools, the proper safety and security checks are there, so that the relevant remediation work could be done in a timely manner, so that we can have a continuous, seamless flow in terms of the education of our students.
That's incredible what you just mentioned there with the Lafayette School, for example, having to operate out of another school's hall. And then even giving the example of schools that were recently commissioned as early as 2012, they are having difficulties as well. So that in itself is a huge red flag for me, having followed the situation. When it comes to Lafayette, for example, a new school compound being built, what are the updates given by the Ministry of Education in respect to the situation there in itself, and the works to be done to actually upgrade either the existing compound or build a new school? What is happening there? Any updates from the Ministry of Education at all?
Right, so I know that the parents of the students of the Lafayette RC School has started some serious advocacy within the last couple of months for a new school to be built, right?
Mr. Dorka, I'm sorry, I know I just asked you a question, but we actually do have to take a quick break on the show. So just stay with us. We're going to try and sort this out, and we'll be right back after this.
Sure.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Welcome back to Amplia, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for that sudden interruption in the interview. But Mr. Dwarka, the Vice President of Tutor, is still with us. Mr. Dwarka, thank you very much once more for being with us this morning. To our last point that we were making in respect to the Lafayette School, for example, that's currently operating out of another school's hall. That is incredible, and that is taking place I believe since 2016. That's 8 years operating out of a school hall. What are the updates or the latest updates from the Ministry of Education in respect to that new school building or school compound that is such a disrepair that they have no alternative but to operate from another school's compound?
Right. So the association would have visited the school earlier this year. Right, so with the original location, right, it is difficult to do infrastructure work there based on land slippage and whatnot, because that is, of course, on the North Coast Road, right? So it's extremely difficult, right? The Parent Teachers Association, they have begun serious advocacy within the last couple of months to get some action from the Ministry of Education, because it is a government-assisted school, and of course, they will be liaising with the relevant board to get the relevant works done. So that in itself is taking a very long time. There has been no positive reports coming out of the Ministry of Education indicating, okay, by X date and whatnot, the school is going to be up and running. So we are currently as well waiting on updates from the Ministry of Education regarding that particular school. But it should be given a priority. This is 8 years down the road, and they have been operating in very difficult conditions. We were there, and when we visited, the rains came. And when the rains came, it was actually beating into the classrooms, right? So that the furniture and whatnot was getting wet, right? And the students as well had to shift and whatnot, because it is the hall, if we know the layout of that particular school, right? The hall, right, is on the eastern side. So it means, therefore, that's the side when, if rain comes in, right, there are issues there. So they have been operating under very serious health conditions. And of course, the association would like to advocate to the Ministry of Education that they begin to look at this particular school as a priority as well.
How many students, if you can just give an approximate figure,
right,
are currently having to attend classes in the hall?
Right, I think by the figure, I could be wrong, was around 300 and something students, the principal would have mentioned to me during that particular time. Right, so that would have been earlier this year. I'm not sure of the exact population now.
You know, you would think that everything is all well and rosy based off of the comments coming from others in authority. If this is the reality of the situation, this story in particular is absolutely incredible, but not at all surprising given what we've lived over the last few months. So the issues that you gave, the other examples that you gave, for example, in Arangwes, 2012, when that school was commissioned, and still getting issues now, 12 years later, it's getting issues. In respect to the maintenance of these schools, once they're raised, as the MTS, which has now taken over operations of maintenance of these schools, have they been efficient in their operations? Have they been able to get as much done as possible, or as much done that is necessary to allow these schools to operate in a timely manner?
Right, so and that's part of the problem, because I think one of the recommendations that the association would want to make to the Ministry of Education is that we really need to look at the existing maintenance plan of our schools, because that is where the problem lies. So we actually wait. I know financing is an issue. The minister would have indicated that financing is a serious issue to do the various remediation works in all our schools. But what could happen is that the association would like to suggest that we have regular inspections. So based on the SIMS report of principals and whatnot, we have regular inspections in our various schools. We schedule those regular inspections in terms of checklists with plumbing, electrical, roofing, and other infrastructural issues. Based on that, we can actually have a very good idea in terms of which schools are necessary for us to go in quickly and do relevant work so that it would not be decanted, or there would not be any rotation, or it would not affect the smooth running or implementation of the curriculum. And that's what we need to do. So we need to have that maintenance plan, to have some kind of preventative maintenance program in place. We had EFCL. There are many issues with EFCL, and now we have EFPPD in charge of the maintenance of schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And they, of course, have hired the MTS to do that relevant works, right? Whether MTS has the capacity to deal with the amount of issues that we have in our schools, we are not too sure whether that may be so. That is why we are suggesting that we have a maintenance schedule and whatnot, so that we can place priority on those schools that need it the most. Right. And I think that's the direction that we would need to go. And information is there because the principals would have been reporting the various issues, right, via the SIMS management system of the Ministry of Education. So they are quite aware that this school has this particular problem and whatnot. So it is up now to them now to begin to deal with the issues in a manner that will not affect the smooth running of the curriculum and the implementation of the curriculum in those schools.
In respect to a recent example that was given of Presel with a rat infestation there, how common are instances of infestations, whether it be of pigeons, rats, whatever the case may be, how common is that occurrence across schools in TNT?
It is extremely common, especially with the pigeons and the rats and bats. Those are the three major kinds of infestations that we have, right? So the association within the last couple of months, right, would have visited a number of schools that are so affected, and we would have seen firsthand the evidence of those droppings, the evidence of those rodents and whatnot living on the compound. Yes, the Ministry of Education would have asked the various regional corporations and whatnot, right, to deal with it, but we need to understand that if we have a rodent infestation like rats and whatnot, it is a safety and a health and safety issue, especially if it's in a primary school, because those young children will not know where to touch, not to touch, where to walk and whatnot, and may simply touch an area that is infected with rodent urine as such and touch it to their faces and whatnot, and we could have an outbreak of a serious problem happening in our schools. So the principals, the association has to look at the safety in situations like that, right? And we cannot take the chance because some places where the infestation is not predominant, that does not mean to say that the rodents have not been running across there, as the case may be. So we cannot tell. So there has to be a proper program to deal with that. Of course, the sanitization of the schools as well, so that the habitation can be safe and secure for our members as well as our students.
Mr. Dorco, in closing this morning's conversation, because you've given quite a number of examples, I'm still in absolute shock as to what you were speaking of with Lafayette. I know they were having issues. I didn't realize that this is an issue that's ongoing for the last 8 years, and 300 plus students operating in a school hall, another school hall for classes. But in closing, the comments from the Minister of Education made in the Senate on November 26th, indicating that the ministry is not operating any schools that are deemed unsafe or unsuitable for kids. And you've also given us an understanding that this is not Tutor who's just saying this. This is coming from OSH as well, the OSH authority. Would you agree with the accuracy of that statement? Would you say that the minister is accurate in her commentary, or is there more to it?
Right. So, of course, the association would have a differing opinion in terms of what the minister would have presented, because before we go public, before we have our interviews and whatnot, we would go to the schools, we would visit, we would check the information, right, to ensure that the information that we have shared, we are accurate with it. When our DFOs send us the messages, we visit the schools to ensure that the accuracy of some of those statements or reports given to us by the principals and by the our DFOs. For example, if we go back to Arang West Secondary School, right, as I said, they just came out from a refusal to work that was upheld by the OSH, right, because of health and safety in that school. Now, there is a particular block in that school, which is the E block, right, the E building. That building houses the hub of the school. So it has all the labs, the physics labs, all the science labs. It houses all the technical areas as well. And that block has been closed for the last 4 years, right, because of an electrical issue. So there was some electrical theft 4 years ago, and up to now, that has not been remedied and is posing a serious threat to the curriculum of the school, because it is very difficult to operate labs out of a classroom, right? Because those labs are not available. It's extremely difficult to do food and nutrition where we have the practical areas, right, in those schools. It is extremely difficult when we have the ODPM and office administration computer labs there as well. And they cannot operate it because there is no electricity and whatnot. And these are just some of the conditions that our schools are operating by, right? So yes, the minister can indicate, right, there are issues, they're on top of it, they are fixing, and they are doing as best as they can, but there are some very serious situations in many of our schools, right, that need some severe and urgent attention, right, in terms of infrastructural works, so that we can have the curriculum being implemented as best as we can.
I would think conducting labs in a classroom is without any question, a downright no. I would think that based off of if people watching know exactly what labs are and what labs entail, I would think that was a outright no. So even that in itself, wow. Mr. Dorica, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning, just to give us an idea as per the situation. Though already that existed, you have just to concretize what we have learned over the last few months. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. All the very best to you and to the rest of the association.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure.
Take care. All the best.
Okay, thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, well, as it relates to our schools infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago, we know, we understand it is not in the best of conditions, and sugarcoating it a bit. But I've spoken to Tutor previously, as I have this morning. I've spoken to the NPT. I've had parents, as members of PTAs, coming on AM Prime to speak about some of these instances. And even we've received reports. Parents are calling us, telling us they don't want to speak on air, but if we can get information for them as per updates for school repairs, etc., etc. And what is even amazing is that when you listen to the minister, it's just like a complete contrast, a contradiction of what others are seeing. So when it comes to the accuracy of these reports or instances of schools being in disrepair or non-functional for whatever the reason, that in itself, ladies and gentlemen, that it's incredible to learn what we are hearing. But let's take a break on the program because we do have a lot more to get into this morning. So stay with us and we'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for staying with us. Packed program. So now we're focusing on this extremely unfortunate case of alleged extortion. Those accused, 7 police officers were accused of extortion. They were charged in 2023, April of 2023. And earlier this week, the case was thrown out of court. 7 police officers accused of extorting businessmen in Sangarani. That case collapsed because the prosecution failed to meet certain court standards. We'll get into that in a bit. But following that news, there was further news of, again, extremely unfortunate, 5 officers also accused of extortion, soliciting $30,000 and 5 pounds of marijuana from a couple during a search at their home in 5 Rivers, Aruca, in November of 2022. That case was also thrown out of court. Now, on the basis of it, this is outrageous. But let's get into the details of this case. I'm joined this morning by Opposition Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West, Mr. Dinesh Rambali. Good morning, MP, and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Keaton, and thank you very much for having me. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. Always a pleasure, Keaton, to join you. And better yet, it's a Friday morning, so I'm really, looking forward to our discussion.
I'm looking forward to after the AM Prime, but it's always a pleasure to have you on the program, MP Rambali. Thanks for joining us. This has been described as outrageous, as a tragedy, as a travesty. There's a lot of frustration associated with the news of these 2 cases being thrown out of court. But it also seems like bad public relations following the constant calls from the Minister in the Ministry of National Security, from the commissioners and deputy commissioners of police to report extortion. This just seems to have gone in the completely opposite direction everyone was thinking we were heading in.
Yes, Keaton, we are in a very unfortunate state of affairs. Just last Friday in the Parliament, I would have brought a motion on the adjournment in the Parliament to treat with the prevalence of extortion crimes, right? Demands by menace crimes. And in that debate, you only have 10 minutes to pilot these motions, and then you have one member of the government who will respond. One of the things that I try to do in as apolitical a manner as possible is to talk about the prevalence, the impact it is having on the country, business sector, individuals, the fear factor. And then I quickly moved into the justice side of it, and therefore what needs to be done. So it was really more suggestions of solution-oriented initiatives. And one of it that I called for, bearing in mind that you need to have high detection rates, bearing in mind that you need to have effective prosecution, I then proceeded to talk about some legislative initiatives or adjustments whereby you would not go after the individuals only who are caught committing the act of extortion. But in most instances, these crimes are believed, and even the head of the anti-extortion unit spoke about a particular gang that was responsible for inflicting the fear, and that was a major headline that was carried, inflicting fear in North and Central Trinidad. And so I spoke about what is called enterprise in law, and therefore, you can have your laws tailored in such a way that, notwithstanding that you can catch some of these individuals, it also allows you to go after this enterprise, because it's a really high form of organized form of crime, which we have to combat when we're talking about extortion. That being said, the point I want to bring home to this discussion was that I spoke about the strengthening of the investigative arms of law enforcement, and I spoke about the strengthening of prosecution. And it's nothing new. I think when I was mentioning that, I was repeating the concerns that have been raised in the public from time to time. And it has been raised by several members of the opposition, commentators, and of course yourself, media, probing the issues insofar as it impacts on the population. So I know I was not saying anything new, but I was emphasizing that in relation to extortion, we have to pay particular keen reference to how it is we prosecute these cases, and making sure, I spoke about expansion of the anti-extortion unit, but also properly resourcing, when I said expansion, these units. And we will see how that has come to bear fruit just a few days later, starting from Monday this week. And then, you had the instance of the first 5 cases, and then you had 7 cases. But Keaton, if you permit me, I just want to take these things in context, because I suspect people are hearing sound bites, but they're not necessarily understanding the details. And I don't blame them. Even I myself had, even as an attorney at law, I had to come to terms with some of it by asking questions that I thought that should be circulating out there as an attorney at law. And even if they are circulating, the information may not be prevalent in the public domain. What I saw from the news last night, as of last night, the police commissioner has a preliminary report. Well, that is good to hear. An audit of the entire matter has been called for, and appropriately so as well, by a colleague of mine, Member of Parliament for Orupuch East, a fuller audit of this entire affair. The PCA, I saw a release from the PCA yesterday, has asked for answers, and that is within their remit, especially in light of the Police Complaints Authority indicating, its director indicating that they have from time to time spoken about and made recommendations concerning how the police have to prosecute cases. I myself have now called on the Law Association to look into this matter as it relates to the administration of justice and the rule of law. And I'm not saying that just to gaslight the situation, or I feel that we need all the commentators on this. But the Legal Profession Act does say that the Law Association has a duty to protect and assist the public in all matters relating to the law, and to promote, maintain, and support the administration of justice and the rule of law. So this is clearly stated as an aim and objective of under the Legal Profession Act of the Law Association. But after all is said and done, the facts will remain the same, and the question is, what are those facts? And I want to make it clear, Keaton, I think the population knows my stance, how I attempt to discuss matters in the public domain. I am not pronouncing on any probe or disclosing anything that is confidential. These are matters or prosecutions that are public matters. It is in the interest of serving the administration of justice that we are having this discussion this morning. So it is important to note that all 7 police officers in what was released in the public domain yesterday morning via print, all 7 police officers were charged with misbehavior in public office. And it is 5 of those officers who were discharged. The court reserved on what we would call a no-case submission for 2 of those 7 officers that were charged. And I think that ruling is still to come about on the 25th of the month. So we will see what happens with those. But I want the public to bear in mind, Keaton, that throughout this discussion, it is the office of the DPP that prosecutes these cases. Once you have a charge, and these charges are as against police officers, you have to bring in the DPP who will prosecute the cases. So that is something I want everyone to bear in mind here. You have police prosecutors, yes, and even if they initiate certain things, the charges, and might make a first appearance, the file will have to go to the DPP, and it's the DPP's office that will prosecute. In this long lineup of charged police officers, there was apparently one lone female officer who was charged. She was part of the search team. I think you kind of touched on the facts, right? The Aruka matter, and there are other facts with this that they're already in the public domain. In the interest of time, there was one lone female officer who was part of the search party team. And one would presume that her role was because she got involved. Once you have females involved on the field, you have to have a female officer that will get engaged in the search of that particular female accused person. So the state apparently conceded that there was no evidence of misbehavior, and asked the court in these matters, having conceded that there was no evidence of misbehavior on the part of that female officer, they asked the court to commit the female officer on any offense that can be disclosed under what we call AJIPA, the Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Act. And the particular section, section 23B, they list a whole list of offenses. So what you had was the state conceding that, look, we can't prosecute a case against this female officer, but here what? We want you, the court, to see whether or not we can indict her, we can commit her on any other offenses. And of course, there was objections. Any defense attorney, competent defense attorney,
that sounds like throwing arrows in the dark.
Yes, of course, and that is what it was. And the defense attorneys would have objected, obviously so. And a court, I mean, you don't need a lawyer to tell you this. A court can only commit on the offenses disclosed on the indictment, right? That is a charge that has been preferred before the court. So as a consequence, the state, on the objection made by the defense, they conceded that there was no case to answer against this lone female officer. So I'm breaking it down to show really how bad this scenario is and what it spells for the administration of justice. In relation to the other officers charged now, the defendant's attorney wrote the DPP seeking what is called a nolli prosequi, or the pronunciation tends to vary, but it's a nolli prosequi. And what that means is that the state had no evidence to support its charges, and therefore you can, under Section 90 of the Constitution, you can write to the DPP. We say apply, but there's a letter you can write, and you can say that the DPP should intervene for the purpose of discontinuing the criminal proceedings. And you proceed to list all the reasons why you feel the proceedings should be discontinued. In this case, there was no evidence. This application of nolli prosequi was brought to the attention of the court, and both parties, both prosecution and defense, have a duty to disclose all of these details before a court officer, a judicial officer. Just like in the case, in the civil court, we have something called case management conferences, and these are hearings specially tailored. The judges are enamored with certain powers to move the cases along, and at the same time weed out bad cases. In the criminal arena, you have something called a sufficiency hearing. The prosecution was confronted with this development, namely that the evidence was lacking, and called upon to indicate its position regarding not having sufficient evidence. The prosecution would have indicated that they would file notices of discontinuance, which they did not. So they would have indicated at the early stage of the proceedings, at the sufficiency, the hearings, that look, we want to consider, and naturally they may need some advice, but again, you have to get the DPP involved. And they were considering discontinuing the proceedings. They did not. The state was to file notices of discontinuance for the accused officers. I have already dealt with the lone female officer. I'm talking about the others. So the court would have dismissed the charges on the defense attorney's application. How does this relate now to the administration of justice scandal that we are now faced with? And it is a scandal We can't dress it up. We can't decorate it. We can't pretend that we, by discussing it in the manner in which we are, that we are further undermining the confidence in the administration of justice. I think this situation has already dealt a severe blow. So let us really begin by examining the delay by the state.
Before you proceed with that, Mr. Rambali, not that I am wanting to be cynical, but as much as this deals with the administration of justice, I understand that. There is also the question that this case really was one that police officers proved, police officers charged police officers then prosecuted police officers, because from what you're telling me, the DPP was not necessarily notified or brought into this case, so no state prosecutor was necessarily present. And then police officers, well, were thrown out of court because the case. So, you know, as I said, not being cynical, but why does this seem all too familiar with respect to the stories of police service and police officers being charged in Trinidad and Tobago?
And well, it is all too familiar because this is not the first time this has happened. And we have had instances of where it did not, the accused persons were not police officers. And in those instances, they have been reported by the media. The media has been doing a very good job in ensuring that the public is aware of the justice system. Not only the crimes committed are out there, but the justice system. So you have had where non-police officers, right, normal civilians have been charged. In this particular case, the delay, and you have really touched on something there, the delay started from the very inception, meaning in the judicial system now, the prosecution, the file was not submitted when it was supposed to. So that is the police ought to have submitted the file to the DPP's office. And they ought to do that when the matters are first brought to the court. That did not happen here in this particular case. The state did not meet deadlines, something that you pointed to. They had deadlines to file what we call ID parade statements, which are required on the prosecution side. That was not done. You have defense attorneys objecting to any extension of time. And this, I want you to bear this in mind now, Akitan, because, and I'm not talking about something that I know intimately. I'm talking about what I'm seeing documented. And they are clearly court orders that emanated from the court, which are circulating on WhatsApp and I presume otherwise in social media. The defense would have objected to any extension of time for the prosecution to fill the gaps. And what you had was that the prevailing master or judge would have invited the parties to make submissions. So what that means is that you just invited to address the court. The parties addressed the court on the issue of whether any extension of time ought to be granted to the prosecution. And listen to this, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution. So before, I want to make it clear, before anyone, particularly government ministers, they go on the attack against the judicial officer in the matter, because you know this government, and this is not a political statement, the facts will bear it out, because you know this government likes to say that they are putting criminals behind bars, but the judiciary freeing the criminals on bail, and then they say that the judiciary is too lenient in favor of the criminals, and that they don't impose harsh enough penalties where they are warranted. Well, I want to make it clear that the facts of this matter suggest that the judicial officer, particularly a master of the court, gave a written ruling where that even though she said that even though the prosecution did not make an application for an extension of time, she, in fact, as judicial officer, was granting it to the prosecution. So here it is, you have a judicial officer, the master, be lenient towards the prosecution. And as a matter of fact, on 3 occasions, 3 Keaton, she granted extensions of time to the prosecution to file what is referred to as the ID parade statements. If you don't,
Mr. Rambali, sorry to interject, but this is a non-existent prosecution at this point.
Yes, correct. You can frame it as that. If you don't, I mean, we don't have the time to speak about exactly what is entailed in an ID parade statement. But what you need to know is that it is simply bringing evidence forward to the court. That is what it is. And after the ruling that the master gave at the sufficiency hearing, the prosecution was not ready and they asked for more time. The court granted it. They were to file what is called a summary of evidence against each accused officer. They failed to do so, Keaton. The defense then made an application to cross-examine this cross-examination is something that you have to apply based on the fact that you want to raise the bad character of the main witnesses involved in the case. And the court again invited the parties to make submissions. In other words, invited the parties to address the court as to whether there should even be cross-examination of the main witnesses. Because, because the prosecution did not file that summary of evidence, the defense could not cross-examine, and therefore, naturally, they would claim prejudice in the preparation of the defense. At the end of the day, remember, persons are innocent, presumed innocent until proven guilty. Prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And this translates even in the procedural aspects of prosecuting a case. No reasonable explanation was offered by the prosecution, Kitan, for not filing that summary of evidence and for not making an extension, application for an extension of time to file a summary of evidence. So let's take it in stages quickly. You wanted an you didn't even make an extension in the first instance to bring evidence. The defense is objecting. The master took it upon, I don't want to say took it upon herself, the master in her discretion as a judicial officer, even without the prosecution making an application to extend the time, granted extensions of time. And here it is now, when you are to bring the ID parade statements, you have to put forward the summary of evidence. Repeatedly, you are being given opportunities to do so, and you fail to do it, and you don't even make an application for further extensions of time. The court therefore dismissed the case. And these are the facts based on documents and information circulating in the public domain. I don't think that the Commissioner of Police, Professional Standards Bureau, PCA, well, the PCA will need some time when they accumulate the facts. But these other authorities don't need much more time. They should be in a press conference today telling us these facts and telling us why it is things went, as we say in local parlance, it went south. The facts may not be easily discernible to non-lawyers. I accept that. But those of us who read them will be in a better position to appreciate what occurred. And what occurred, Keita? You had a poor investigation leading to no evidence. That's what this case, and you sort of alluded to it by saying, but it sounds as though there was no case to get off the ground. In this case, the investigation may have been, I'm saying may have been. Let the authorities come and explain. But what we have read in paper and what we are seeing by virtue of court orders emanating from the court in circulation. In this case, Kitan, the investigation may have been so poor. That is why no evidence could have been presented. And this is where we have to ask these questions. Is it that only the first two officers ought to have been charged? And remember, I started off by saying you still have a determination to come on the 25th, I believe. Is it that only the first two officers ought to have been charged and not the others who merely accompanied the officers for the execution of the warrant on the field? That's a substantive question in this whole thing, because that now relates to whether or not you have a Professional Standards Bureau that is being overly enthusiastic and they did not understand the law when laying the charges.
Well, Professional Standards Bureau is a whole question mark around that right now, because these charges, I think it's very important to note, are also laid by
the next question. Yes, correct. And the next question, that our issue, if I may say, that we have to look at as citizens. Would the administration of justice and the citizens' interest be served by relaying the charges? Because that is the talk, not all is not lost. We could have, relaying of the charges. Certain officials of government have suggested that this can be done. And for me personally, I hope they are right. But then I put on my legal cap. And if they are speaking to possibly relay the charges, well, let's examine that proposition now to see where our tax-paying dollars will be spent. The court, having dismissed the matters, Keaton, after the state conceded there was no evidence of misbehavior, means that the state cannot relay the charges as against the 5 officers. That is just that simple. If you concede you have no evidence in one case, you think you can relay it and come and prosecute it in another case? That just doesn't make any sense. It would be what we call in law an abuse of process. And in law, we call that autrefois acquit. Essentially, as there was an indication on the merits of the case. So if there was a technical difficulty, the state can seek what is called a judge's warrant, where the accused is discharged. But in this case, the matters were dismissed again. And I want people to remember, for want of prosecution, lack of evidence, so no options will remain. In relation to the other 7 other officers, which I know time didn't permit us to get into, that was the first release on, if it was Monday morning, when it was Tuesday morning, the day before, because those matters were dismissed by the state for not submitting the file at the beginning of the first sufficiency hearing. As I said, the file is to be sent to the DPP to appoint a prosecutor. Then the DPP can seek to relay the charges. But again, an abuse of process application can be made by those defendants to stay those charges on the same double jeopardy principles in law, meaning in layman terms, you cannot be prosecuted twice for the same offenses. So if the state tries to relay charges, Keaton, it means that we, the taxpayers, will be paying for failed prosecutions a second time around. That is what it means. And bearing in mind, these officers are entitled to file individual civil claims for malicious prosecution. If they are successful, taxpayers' monies will have to be paid out to them in damages. And we see this all too often on the newspapers.
Well,
so they can, yes.
The approach might be, for the sake of public relations, to try and relay charges again. It's something that, again, one can predict based off of history. But putting that aside for the moment. On another hand, Mr. Rambali, these individuals who have been accused, though the cases have been thrown out of court, they still have been accused. They have and will not have any opportunity to clear those accusations laid against them.
Correct. And Kita, I am pulling up my notes, but before, I was listening to Mr. Anisette in the segment earlier and making notes for preparation. I was making some notes, and this is what I actually wrote in my cockroach scribble handwriting. The people's interests, in the interest of administration of justice, is based on due process. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning. This due process ensures that the accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And they must be allowed to put forward their defenses. So that is one part of due process. So these officers did not get the opportunity to prove their innocence, so to speak, right? Put forward their defense and have it determined on the merits of the case. And the other part of due process is the state must do their part in prosecuting the offenses, which we know on that limb as well that we have failed. So it works both ways. And Peter, to wrap up, because I know you said we would try to end by 7:10. The conversation in my mind needs to move to how we say AJIPA, right? Administration of Justice and Indictable Proceedings Act. How is AJIPA working? This is an act which came into force in 2023. There was a lot of debate. I don't know if I myself was on your program talking about it, but I know I followed a fair amount of discussion on your station, where lawyers would have weighed in onto these amendments and stuff. It was supposed to be and touted as the savior of the criminal justice system. But as it stands now, I can tell you that court dates are already going to 2026. We are in 2024, and court dates are going to 2026. What you have in between that, with that whole delay, is that the state is still unable, I say the state, but the prosecution is still unable to meet deadlines. So what you're saying is that matters are being dismissed. It has been stated in the public domain, and the opposition has maintained in the parliament. I want to be fair to my colleagues. Senator Jayanti Lakshmi, Member of Parliament for Urupach East. You had Member of Parliament for Barataria, Sawan, and others, right? Making this point. It has been made in the Parliament and in the public domain that we don't have the infrastructure and the right mix to support an efficient justice system. We don't have enough masters. We don't have enough prosecutors. And when I talk about prosecutors, I'm talking about both police and the DPP. So we are not ready for AJIPA, but the government, unfortunately, and this is where I have to say this, the government is playing politics and passing laws which we are not ready for, thereby resulting in more problems in the system. And what has happened over the past few days is a stain, yes, but it is a scandal in the administration of justice, and the confidence which you, me, and the citizens ought to repose in the administration of justice may very well have been irreparably damaged. And that is the worst thing that you can have in a society.
Well, MP Rambali, you've laid the foundation for a broader topic of conversation, just by these two cases alone, a lot of questions you've raised this morning, and you've laid, as I said, laid the foundation to the direction of the conversation. But at this time, we are out, we are over time, and I want to thank you very much for joining us. And well, we'll have to expand on this topic in due time. But thank you very much for this morning, so thank you for your time and presence.
Yes, and thank you, Keaton, for this opportunity. I apologize if I was a little bit too lengthy, but I would like to delve into this some more. So I appreciate this first instance opportunity. And a happy Friday to you and to your viewers and listeners. And I trust everybody will have a safe, secure, and enjoyable weekend. I have started personally my Christmas celebrations in little bits. I'm not just waiting to have a big bang at Christmas time, right? Christmas Day. I'm trying to have little bits every weekend leading up to Christmas. And I wish everybody the same.
Well, thank you very much, and that is something I'm trying to do as well. It's my favorite time of the year, so I'm looking forward to every little aspect of it. But length is not the issue as long as the quality is there. Quantity is never the problem if quality is there. So no worries at all. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
WESN.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics, from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God!
Oh, poor baby.
Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away. May the force be with you.